Alrighty. Well, welcome to CSCS with some SPTs. It's gonna be a wild journey. My name is Hayden Hathaway, the PT student with the University of Utah. Got my bachelor's degree at Utah Valley University in exercise science. Applied to U of U's program. Currently in my second year, so going through that. That's me. A little bit of what I've done.
I'm Quinn. I am from St. George, Utah. I graduated from Utah Tech University, formerly Dixie State University. I also am a SPT at the University of Utah. Um, Hayden, what are your hobbies?
Staying active, playing soccer is the biggest one. Playing, watching. A lot of honestly, I don't mind things. I really enjoy cooking too. Oddly enough, that's a fun one for me.
That,
But
that's a good one.
what about you, man?
Uh, some of my hobbies, I enjoy lifting heavy stuff and mixed martial arts.
There we go. All right, yeah. So I mean, we'll do. Well, I mean, we'll go chapter by chapter. Today we'll go through chapters 1 and 2. Just bring anybody that's curious along for the journey, whether that's either being a PT student or wanting to get your CSCS, maybe athletic training, something along those lines. Really, kind of for everybody. Just figured while we were suffering through it,
Join us.
yeah, record it and see what happens.
I I was thinking as I was thinking about preparation for this. I know at least some of the things that I've studied while preparing for this, I've already seen implemented in the clinic as we are on our first clinical rotation. And so there may be times that we'll talk about those, and obviously we'll change names or just omit names completely um, for HIPAA purposes. But a lot of the things that we will discuss definitely have implications in the clinic, whether it's with athletes or anybody that you'd see in the clinic.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, a lot of these concepts are like, especially with the CSCS, right? We're looking at athletes pretty much specifically, but I mean, yeah, you can easily implement this into any sort of training or program. I mean, concepts of progression, regression, understanding how the muscles function is pretty important for any sort of strength building, recovery, anything like that. So,
Definitely, definitely. Okay, chapter one. It's kind of the basics, kind of just the introduction to the body and how it works and how it is all interconnected. Um, so, I mean, the main the main part that PTs and athletes like to focus on is the muscle, obviously.
oh yeah,
Um, whether it's looking pretty or being strong or being fast or being powerful. Um, so the the Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning actually notes that the muscle is an organ. Um, I before reading that, I hadn't really ever thought about that, but it says that it's an organ because it has its own um, cells, its own blood supplies, its own nervous system, and then it has its own energy systems as well in there.
yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, I remember being sitting in that first anatomy class, and they're like, "What's the biggest organ in your body?" And everyone's like naming things. They're like, "Nope, the skin." And I just was baffled in the back of the class. I was like, "What are these guys tripping on, dude? There's
Yeah,
no way."
yeah,
But so I mean, it makes perfect sense.
yeah. And like this slide behind us is saying, um, the muscle is broken down into even more structures. So it breaks down. You've got your main muscle belly, and the muscle belly is covered by what's the called the epimysium. Um, when I learn, I really like to look at the roots and the origins of words. And epi means above or out. It's that outermost layer. You've got your epidermis, which is the outermost layer of your skin. The epimysium is the outermost cover of the muscle. So that's how I like to remember that one. And then, so that just covers the entire muscle belly. And then it breaks down into smaller sections. You've got the perimysium, peri, which is around. And so that breaks down the muscle belly into fasciculi, which are just smaller units within the muscle. And then you've got the endomysium, which is endo meaning like inside. And that's going to break it down into one of our smallest units called muscle fibers. And muscle fibers are really important, and we're going to discuss those a little more later. But the muscle fibers, along them, you have the sarcolemma, which is just another enclosure within that endomysium. And within it is where we're going to see some of those muscle nuclei and where the actual synapses are going to start to occur. And then I think the last major point of this slide is that the epimysium, the perimysium, and the endomysium all eventually come together at the end of a muscle, and that's what makes our tendons.
Yep. Yeah, perfect. Then sarcoplasm of the sarcoplasm of the cytoplasm of the cell. So I mean, sarcoplasm just more specific to the muscles, where cytoplasm more common amongst all cells there. So easy to trip on, but good to know the difference between them. So I mean, that sarcoplasm, that's where we get our actual like contractile unit of the muscle. I was like, that's where we get all of our nerve action potentials like end up running through, and then we get that. We'll get into that sliding filament theory here in a second. But this is kind of where all of that takes place in. And so, yeah, like it says on the slide, protein stored, glycogen, sarcoplasmic reticulum, T tubules, mitochondria, all important for the overall contraction of the muscle. I mean, everything's labeled on the slide there, so it is kind of good to picture that, have that general understanding of them. And then sarcoplasm contains hundreds of myofibrils, which have, your two types of myofilaments, which are actin and myosin. Again, those are important for that sliding filament theory, which we'll get into a bit here in a second.
And just one other thing that I just wanted to point out is these T tubules, as you can see in the pink, they kind of wrap all the way around those myofibrils, and then the sarcoplasm reticulum, that blue net-like, or the structure that's labeled in blue, connects to that and is also wrapping all around that, just to create a faster highway of sending that signal throughout the muscle, so that it can get nice and deep in there.
Yeah, because that sarcoplasmic reticulum is actually what carries the signal down into the muscle cells, the sarcomere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, we have that contractile unit of the muscle, the sarcomere. It's a single contractile unit, is that sarcomere, and it is pretty in depth when you start to really look at it. It's got the actin, the myosin, and then it's got troponin and tropomyosin, and they all kind of work together and are intertwined. And I didn't realize I knew actin and myosin from undergrad and exercise physiology, and I somewhat remembered troponin and tropomyosin, but it was back in my mind.
Yeah. Yep.
But as I was reading, one interesting thing that I discovered is that a myosin pairs with 6 actin.
Oh, wow.
And each actin pairs with 3 myosin. And there's actually a really nice diagram in the book that you can see here of the A bands, the I bands, and the M lines. And so I'll try to color it a little bit better. So you've got these. Sorry, let me orient just ever so slightly.
No worries.
So the I band is going to be mostly your actin filaments, and so these little tiny dots right here all over the place You can sort of see me coloring them in, I hope. And then you've got the A band, which is going to be where the myosin is, and they're going to be these more reddish, maroonish colored ones. But you can also see those actin right in there, those little tiny dots that I'm coloring back in. And so if you look at them, you can see how just a single myosin is going to connect with up to 6 of those actins. And then you can also see how just one of those actins is able to connect with up to 4, um, 3. Sorry, my bad.
Good.
I am a student. Obviously, we did mention that. There will be mistakes.
Yeah, we'll try and catch them as we go, but nobody's perfect. We are studying to take this.
Yes.
We have not taken it yet.
Yes. But yeah, so you can see how those all interconnect. And then looking at them more on a slightly larger level, you can see where those cross bridges are, where the myosin, this structure right here, and the actin, these structures, are going to be able to form cross bridges. And slightly larger, we have that blown up. And so blue, or I guess, so this blue right here is going to be your tropomyosin, or sorry, your troponin. Sorry.
There we go.
Yep. Is going to be your troponin on the tropomyosin. And so what it is doing is it actually blocks the binding sites of the muscle, stopping the myosin heads from connecting with the actin.
Yeah.
But then when those nerve signals from our brain travel all the way down to the muscle, they're going to release that calcium that we mentioned.
Yep.
And that's going to bind to the troponin, moving it off of the actin, allowing the myosin to create those cross bridges and form a power stroke, which is where the muscle is shortening. And so just a couple structures that I mentioned real quickly. You've got your I band, which is going to be just actin. You've got your A band, which is going to be the myosin, and where it is cross bridging, or where it is intertwined with the actin and myosin. And then the Z line is just going to be the connection between different actin units. It's going to be this one right here.
Yep.
And then your M line is just going to be the middle of the myosin and how it connects. And so you can see that right over here.
This is that muscle contraction sliding filament theory here. So as Quinn mentioned, we have those different, so that first, I guess I'll start with the action potential, right? I mean, our muscles work in an all or nothing. Either you hit the action potential and you get the contraction, or you don't get enough energy and you don't get the contraction. So once you hit that peak and it's enough, you get that AMN, or alpha motor neuron, synapses on the muscle, that sends that signal, and that signal then jumps onto the T tubules, which, as you pointed out, run around the muscle fibers. Those then, leave, or to all levels in another alpha motor neuron synapses on the surface of the muscle belly of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And that's one where you could see them all running down. I think you had them colored in blue. Run them all down into the muscles. And those release that calcium. Calcium shoots out of there. And that's when you get that them binding to the troponin, which then pulls the tropomyosin away from the actin, leaving the myosin with a binding site to actually get that sliding filament theory. Don't worry, if that takes you a second to grasp, the first time I learned this, it took me like a week to get this concept.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, it even took me a good 30 minutes reading that again to be like, oh, dude, I got to remember that. So yeah, then you can get those cross bridges, and that's where you get like the actual muscle contraction of them just pulling closer, and then hence what you see with the muscle contraction, being able to pick things up, or the power stroke.
Okay. You mentioned the all or none principle. Um, how does that work? Like, I can I can pick up this pen, but I'm not picking it up the same way that I would pick up a 400-pound deadlift.
Yeah. So I mean, this is actually interesting with the human body. So when you're like, like I'm being lazy, like this sucks, and you like, kind of feel that way. To be honest, the human body is designed to be lazy. It does
Okay.
not like exerting more effort than it needs to.
Okay.
It likes saving energy. So when you're like, I can go to the gym or I can sit on the couch. Like everybody has that temptation because that's how you program to save energy. I mean, like back in the day, hunters and gatherers, right? They exert energy when they can, and then when they don't need to, they're gonna rest and not do anything. When they need to go get food, okay, I'll go exert the energy that I need.
Okay.
So that programming is still kind of in our DNA in a sense. And so when we're picking up like a pencil, your body goes, okay, I only need to use a couple muscle fibers to get this.
Okay.
And when you're doing your 400-pound deadlift, it's going to take more than a couple. I hope it takes more than a couple muscle fibers to get that bar off the ground.
Listen, I'm not Eddie Hall. I ain't lifting 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that's more of a max effort. So your body, and like we'll talk more about this later, but the way your body contracts muscles is it goes, okay, I'm going to do low energy, low power things first. That's not enough. Okay, I'll do a little more high energy, a little more power. That's still not enough. A little more max energy, max power to get it done.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Makes sense.
Perfect. And then here's kind of that energy for contraction. So those power strokes, right? I mean, everything, like I said, our bodies are lazy. Everything does take energy, though. And so you actually get the process of hydrolysis and the breakdown of ATP to ADP and another P or phosphate. I was like, honestly, I cannot remember how to say the full ATP name if you remember.
Adenosine triphosphate.
That's the one. Yep. And then ADP, adenosine diphosphate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it is catalyzed by an enzyme, ATPase, that helps make that process go along smoother because it does take energy every time the myosin both binds and releases. It takes energy for both. So that's why also sometimes when people die, you see them get real stiff because the body's not producing energy to let go of the muscle contraction.
Okay.
That's where you get that from.
And definitely something that we're going to focus on in some later chapters. But just to hit on, ATP is that energy that our muscles use for contraction.
Yes.
And our body has different ways of making that. 3 specific systems are the main mechanism for that. And we're going to go real deep into that in chapter 3, how those are made.
That's
but
awesome.
we get them from our nutrition and the things that we're eating to create that energy.
Yep. Nutrition is definitely another fun. That's a wild category to me.
It is. And I'm so glad that you love cooking because you're going to be really great at explaining some of these things.
Okay.
At least I really hope.
We'll see what I remember. Definitely going to be reviewing those before next week. Here we go.
We talked a little bit about the phases of contraction.
Yep.
There's 4 main phases. There's just resting where, I'm just sitting here not doing anything besides talking. My arms, they're just resting. I have little weak bonds of the myosin trying to form those cross bridges but being blocked. But they are still trying, and they're kind of able to combine with that troponin, but not at a strong, forceful rate that you'd be able to create any real contraction. And then you've got that excitation, contraction coupling, the formation of the strong bonds where that calcium is bound to the troponin, it's moved out of the way, and you've got the actin and the myosin now creating those cross bridges.
Yep.
Then you've got the power stroke. and that is where the ATP is now connected to it. The ATP has been broken down with hydrolysis. It's ditched one of those P's, and that released energy to allow the myosin head to cock back and shorten that muscle. And then, in order for it to contract further, you have to have another ATP come in, take the place of that now ADP on that muscle, allowing it to detach and attach again at another phase and cock again.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So then here are those action potentials we were mentioning earlier. And so, like I said, that all or nothing principle. So it either, like, you have to hit a certain line. Even if they were just under it, you're still not going to get that neuron to fire. Even if you just go under it, okay, now you've hit that all or nothing. It's going to fire with the same strength whether you hit it here or here.
Okay.
So it releases the same amount of energy, but you just need to be able to hit it. And that causes the acetylcholine to be released into the sarcolemma. And then again, it goes to the T-tubule, sarcoplasmic reticulum, calcium, the whole process we just went over a little bit ago. And then the twitch is a single fast muscle contraction, right? I mean, we've all kind of seen that. Or if you're a student or have experience with physical therapy or sort of athletic training, a TENS unit, quick jump, you're like, oh, all right, there it is, right? Still firing. And then if enough twitches occur closer together, that's when you get a full muscle contraction. So twitch, just a little jump, full muscle contraction, coming all the way up. But if you get enough of those firing at once, or actually, we'll get into that later. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the alpha motor neuron is responsible for a group of muscle fibers called a motor unit. So it's not every muscle fiber is innervated by a specific nerve. Nerves actually go branch out onto a muscle, and then they fan out onto that muscle. So you get one nerve that fires a ton of different muscles.
Okay.
And so that's why you also have like more dexterity in some muscles than others, right? I mean, with your hands, it's a little finer movements, a little easier versus shoulder. Kind of a bigger muscle, bigger motor unit recruitments.
Definitely.
Same quad is the biggest one there. And then so, and then that all or nothing principle.
Yeah. And so we have these different muscle fiber types. You mentioned how the body is lazy.
Yep.
And so it is really good at using that minimum amount of energy that we need and the types of muscles that it recruits in that order to be the laziest that it possibly can be.
Yep.
And so you've got these type 1 muscles that they don't take a lot of energy for them to start contracting. They're the muscles that you just use every day to walk around, to breathe. They're going to be the muscles probably in the smooth muscle lining of our esophagus, our intestines that are helping to move food through so that we can digest it, get those nutrients. Just those things that you're using every day. Not a lot of force generating power, but they're really good with endurance and going a long time. In fact, a lot of athletes that participate in endurance sports have a larger bias towards those type 1 fibers.
Yeah.
And then you've got the type 2 fibers. There's type 2A and type 2X or 2B, depending on what literature you're reading. Those are going to be the two main types. There's actually quite a few types of both type 1s and type 2s that we're going to discuss just ever so slightly later, but this is the main components that you're going to need to know, just these type 2s and type 1s. Type 2s are going to be those more forceful, strong contractions for larger, heavier things. And you mentioned how there is that progression of I need this much, then I need this much, then I need this much.
Yep.
And so you're going to start with those type 1 fibers, and then you're going to move on to those type 2A fibers. And then if those still aren't enough, you're going to move into those type 2X fibers. And along with that, you're also going to have more often action potentials coming into those muscles, because the more action potentials you're getting, you're going to get the stronger contraction from those muscles. And then we're going to start getting more muscles. So it's kind of a combination of both of those to create the most forceful contraction that we can.
Okay. Gotcha. I noticed in here you put high mitochondria content and then high fatigue resistance. Why? Yeah. What importance do you feel that like mentioning that a lot of mitochondria and why that would be important for like a type 1 muscle fiber versus a type 2X, which has low mitochondria?
Definitely, definitely. And we're going to talk a lot about that in chapter 3, but very important to bring up now. So a lot of you have probably heard the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. You probably learned it in high school and have no idea what that actually means. So
Any biology class.
the mitochondria is actually a very important component within that muscle nuclei to create a large amount of ATP. It can help break down fat and turn it into ATP. It takes a byproduct of carbs and breaks them down into ATP, and it can even break down muscle into ATP if it's needed.
Okay.
And when it does that, it creates a lot of ATP.
Okay.
But it does it very slowly.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's where you get that high fatigue resistance then.
Yeah.
There's just an abundance of energy that the muscle has or can produce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely,
Gotcha.
definitely. And then as you progress through, you're going to get lower amounts of mitochondria. So it's going to fatigue a lot faster, but it's going to rely more on some of those other types of energy to create faster energy, but those are going to burn through a lot faster.
Okay. Makes sense then.
And so here we've got a table just kind of breaking down those fiber types and their sizes of their alpha motor neurons and their motor units and how fast they do a lot of things. And so you're more than welcome to pause the video, look through this. It comes directly out of the textbook, which highly encourage you buy and read for this exam.
Yes. I was like, there's a lot on that table, but I think it is good to, I mean, as we go along and as you kind of like, I mean, if you follow us, we talk about it more. And so it's less intimidating as we go, but it's good to at least have a general understanding of this table and why things are the way that they are. Like, okay, yeah, their recruitment threshold is low. Why is that? Oh, because it's an endurance muscle. It's not going for a ton of power. I just need to be able to work for a long time. So like your posture muscles.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a lot of effort, but I need to do it all day.
Something that just crossed my mind that we probably should have brought up for anybody that happens across these videos. The CSCS exam is a fairly in-depth exam, and in order to even sit for this exam, you have to have a degree in a field related to sports or nutrition or biology. So not just anybody can go and take this exam. So obviously you're always more than welcome to watch these videos and learn from them and learn along with us. But if you're wanting to sit for that exam to take it for yourself, you do need to either have a degree in a sports or nutrition or biology related field, or be a senior in your final year of your undergraduate work to take that exam.
Yeah. So I mean, right, if you're like maybe wanting to be a personal trainer, not quite have your degree yet or thinking about getting your degree, want to know the information, but don't want to go through all the troubles, yeah, maybe these videos work for you. Or if you're just curious about fitness and want to learn more. Either way.
Definitely.
Ooh, perfect. So here's that motor unit recruitment that I was talking about earlier. So like I said, body's lazy. It's going to recruit things that take low energy, so our type 1 fibers. And it's like, I don't need a lot for that. It's pretty easy to activate and they don't fatigue easily. So I'm going to go for that one first. And like that 400-pound deadlift, you're moving that. I mean, if you can do that, more than likely it's a pretty max effort for you. It's like not a lot of people are picking that bar up. So then like, okay, your body's like, I'm still not getting what I want done. Okay, I'm going to go to the type 2As now. A little stronger, a little better. If we're still not getting it up, okay, your body's like, all right, I'm all in. I'm pulling my strongest fibers. I'm going those type 2X fibers, high power, but they're going to fatigue quick. Like, I just need to get this done now. That's when you're going to get those, and it will follow that recruitment pattern every time.
What about strikers and wingers in soccer? What type of fiber would they probably be using the most?
Gotcha. So your strikers, your wingers, I mean, you definitely need. It's interesting. You're probably going to be looking more so in the middle with your type 2As, because you do need to have that explosive power when you need it. I mean, and everybody's going to have, like, no muscle is solely type 1 fibers, type 2As, type 2X.
Yeah.
They all, like, every muscle is a bit of both, but they can be biased towards one or the other. So you can have more type 1s or more type 2Xs. And even with training, you can kind of see people, they've done studies with twins. I can't think of any studies off the top of my head, but quick Google Scholar search, you'll find, or Google Scholar search, you'll find a couple.
Okay.
So, I mean, they've seen like twins. So, I mean, they have the same genetics, and you can see them. Like, there's one I remember in one of our classes we talked about. There was a cross country runner who looked significantly different than his twin brother that was a power lifter. Cross country runner was quite a bit thinner than the power lifter was. And it's like, it's interesting because you, like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's my genetics. I can't do this. I can't do that. But you can train things to change over time.
Definitely.
And so, yes, there is a ceiling. Everybody does have a limit of what they can hit. Unfortunately, that is a thing. But doesn't mean we can't train and progress towards that ceiling.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, so like that is interesting. But yeah, for like your wingers, your strikers, I mean, a lot of the time, especially if you're doing full field 11v11, yeah, you're going to be jogging around a little bit for the most part. And then every couple minutes, okay, now I'm in a full field. Now I'm in a full sprint. And then you go back to your jogging. I mean, they did like a study on Messi. He walks like the first 10 minutes of pretty much all his games.
Really?
Yeah. He just walks. He observes, and then once he needs it, he'll explode.
Okay.
That's great. I mean,
what about some of those midfielders? I know you really enjoyed playing midfield, or you played a lot of midfield. I don't know if you enjoyed it.
Yeah, right. That's a little more endurance. The ball tends to be in the middle a little more, so you're gonna have a little more. You're like probably a little more biased towards those type 1 fibers. You're not sprinting as much, but you're kind of in control of the tempo of the game. So I always need to be aware, or not me. I mean, I left that role. That was not me. So whoever that is needs to be a little more aware at all times, a little more jogging. Like, yeah, you're still going to have your quick bursts, but for the most part, yeah, it's kind of that consistent, slow, like, yeah, I just need to be attention what's around me. I need to control the pace of the game.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, I mean, what about you? I mean, you fighters. What kind of fibers are you guys using?
So fighters use they use a lot of both. They have to have that strong power for some of those knockout shots, the ones that you see the highlight reels of all the time. That's going to be a lot of type 2X fibers. But go spend 3 minutes in a ring, you're going to be breathing pretty heavy. So they're kind of a lot of a middle. They just have to get really good at both aspects of it, because they're going to fatigue, but they have to be able to recover, but they need that power when they need it. You'll actually, if you ever watch fighting, you'll see a lot of coaches in between rounds telling fighters, take 10% off those punches, take 20% off those punches. You're going to fatigue. You're going to fatigue. And you can see the fighters that listen, and you can see the fighters that don't. And come the end of the fight, the fighters that didn't listen, they're dead. Their hands are at their side. They're opening themselves up for a lot of damage, and they almost always lose because they weren't smart with their energy conservation, and they just burned it all up on those power muscles instead of taking that little bit off and using some of those less fatigue fatigable fibers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, right. It makes sense. And I think a lot when you get into like, I don't want to like generalize like, oh, like the like sports in this way, but I mean, you get a lot of sports like that have those multiple components. You're going to see a lot of mix of fibers versus someone who's a marathon runner. They're definitely going to be using a lot of those type 1 fibers. I mean, world record is still just under 2 hours. Like,
I'm sorry, that's type 1 fibers?
yeah, which is still crazy to me. I mean, like, that's what I like. We do have a ceiling. There's no shot. I don't know how. It doesn't matter how much I train. I am not going to be hitting just under 2 hours on a marathon.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, and then you have like your power lifters, right? Like they train for that. Okay, I'm going all out for 10 seconds max.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're type 2X. Like that's what they've trained their body for. But a lot of things, like in reality, are going to be a mix.
Yeah, definitely. So in our muscles, we have some different special. How would you classify these? They speak to our nervous system to tell our brain what our muscles are doing. I can't remember what they were called in neuroanatomy, where we discussed them a little more in depth.
Yeah, they're not alpha motor neurons. I want to say is it gamma?
That sounds right.
It's gamma.
Yeah, sounds right. Obviously, go and check.
Yes, those. Yeah, that go check.
Go and check. But so there's 2 main types. You have your muscle spindles and your Golgi tendon organs, or your GTOs. The muscle spindles are going to be really sensitive to stretching, and if your muscle stretches too fast, they're going to send a signal to just the spinal cord. It doesn't need to go all the way up to the brain, and then it's going to synapse with an alpha motor neuron, and it's going to cause the muscle to contract. It's actually what's going on when you've gone to the doctor and they've done that tap on that tendon right below your knee, the patella tendon tap. That's what's going on there. They're stretching that muscle really quickly when they tap it. That signal's going up, and then it is contracting the muscle. And then the Golgi tendon organs, there's a couple different thought processes with those. You've got a slightly older study that looked at rats where they attached a heavier weight to a muscle, and they watched what happened with the Golgi tendon organs. And at extreme weights for the rat, the Golgi tendon organ actually started to shut down the muscle, not allowing it to contract further as a protective mechanism. But it also, and its main component, it is really important for sensing tension within muscles. So we have this slide titled proprioception, which is an awareness of where your muscle or where your limbs are in space. So the muscle spindles are going to be really good at looking at where you're good, man. Where the muscle is. Say if I were to take Hayden's arm with his eyes closed and lengthen it, he could tell me how far I had lengthened it because the muscle spindles are looking at that stretch. Whereas the Golgi tendon organs are going to be, if I were to close my own eyes and move my arm, I can fairly accurately say I've moved my arm to 90 degrees without looking at it, because the Golgi tendon organs are telling me the amount of tension that I have put on that muscle.
Yes, and I did check it. It is the gamma.
The gamma. Perfect.
You're right with those. But yeah, basically, kind of to dumb them down, muscle spindles excite. They get excited when you hit them, and they fire. Golgi tendon organs. The way it was explained to me in undergrad by a professor was a party. Your muscle spindles are the ones that want to contribute to the party. They want to go and be a part of the rager. Your Golgi tendons, they're the cops. They're going to show up and bust the party. They're going to shut everything down. So that's how it was explained to me. If that helps you remember it, go for it. But I think that's always just a funny thing to bring up.
I like it. I like it. Muscle spindles are bringing the keg.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Golgi tendons are the cops and the nosy neighbors.
Yeah, always trying to ruin the fun, shut the muscle down. But like you said, I mean, that's kind of the basic. They do play that more important role in proprioception.
Yeah, definitely. Some other important systems that they focused on in this chapter is just the cardiovascular system.
So much fun.
It's what is important for supplying a lot of nutrients to our muscles so that they can work. Nutrients, energy has to get to the muscle somehow. Blood is the most effective way to get it there. So your blood, when you digest food, the nutrients are going to move into the bloodstream. Oxygen is going to move into the bloodstream. Both of those things very vital for muscles. And so just understanding how the cardiovascular system works is important for that. You've got your heart. Its heart rate is controlled by some of our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. You've got the sympathetic system, which is going to increase your heart rate. The parasympathetic is going to decrease your heart rate. Sympathetic is that fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest.
Yeah, just like something else to think about too, right? I mean, like the heart is a muscle. And so they got a lot of those type 1 fibers that we were talking about earlier. It's something that we want working all day. We don't want that fatiguing, right? And it's a highly specialized muscle, obviously. A couple of them in the body. This is one of them. Definitely. But just like a thing to think about as you're going through this, it's always good to bring concepts together.
Definitely, definitely. Pulmonary system, also known as your lungs, works very closely with the heart.
Yes.
So I think the next slide will show just how closely they are connected. But this is how you're going to get air into your lungs or into your bloodstream, the oxygen that we need. It's going to come in through you're going to breathe it in through either your nose or your mouth. It's going to travel down the trachea through the bronchioles, which is where it's going to split into two. At this, blue was not a good option there. There we go, at that green, you can see. So then it'll move into the bronchioles here. And then you've got I think they're called the bronchioles, which is where it gets a little bit smaller. Yep. There's actually like 23 divisions from breathing in all the way down to these little tiny sacs right here called the alveoli. And only the last 3 do what we call oxygen exchange or diffusion. Yep. The rest is just called for ventilation, bringing that air in, taking it out. Yep.
And then they're mentioned on it, the lungs run off of pressure gradients. So that's why when you break into that pleural cavity, you get some problems. You get the spontaneous pneumothorax, lung collapses. So that's why that's a huge thing. But
definitely. So when you combine that cardiovascular system and the pulmonary system, it's called the cardiopulmonary system. We had a class all about it. It was a lot of fun. Some people enjoy it a lot more than others.
That class almost throttled my grade.
That class was hard. I'm not going to lie. That was a lot of in-depth.
Yeah.
Hopefully much further in depth than you're actually going to need for this exam.
Oh, I hope so, bro.
And just the different pathologies that you can have both in the cardio system, the pulmonary system and how they work together and what that's going to present like in a person.
Yep.
And how we would rehabilitate that person as physical therapists. But here you can see how the blood is going to flow. And I'll try to draw some arrows. So you've got your blood coming in through the inferior vena cava, the superior vena cava. It's going to come into this right atrium.
Yes.
Then it's going to go through this bicuspid, or sorry, tricuspid.
Try before you
try
buy.
before you buy. That's right.
Fun things we got to do. Remember.
Then it's going to come into the right atrium. And you can see here at the atrium level, this is where a lot of muscle is. All this stuff that I'm also coloring in green, probably somewhat colored in red, so it's slightly different.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is going to be the main contractile part of the heart. And so it's going to take the blood in all the way. We've come through here. We've come down into the right ventricle, and then it's going to come up the pulmonary artery, which is the only artery that is going to carry deoxygenated blood in the body.
Yep.
Then it's going to go through out into the lungs, where it's going to be oxygenated at those alveoli, and then back in through the pulmonary vein, the only vein carrying oxygenated blood.
Yes.
Into the left atrium,
Yep.
Then the left mitral valve or bicuspid valve, right ventricle, and then all the way out through the aorta. And from there, it is going to get spread throughout your entire body.
Yep.
And that is the first lecture. We covered a lot of things. Hopefully, those of you that are studying for this exam, it was fairly just a review of just the body and the systems, and you were able to go through it at a slightly faster speed.
Yeah, than we were.
I don't know about you guys. I watch a lot of our lectures at like 1.5 times speed.
Yeah, dude.
Sometimes they talk really slow in lectures, and it's a little too slow for me, and I just want to get the information and get it over with.
I think we're all that way.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. All right, if you gotta watch it at 1 time speed, because maybe this is the first time you're going through it, or we're throwing a lot of terms at you that you don't know, totally fine. The amount of times I've been like, I'm gonna watch this fast, and then I end up watching it twice on 1.5 times speed. I'm like,
should have just watched it at the 1 time speed the first time.
Yeah, my impatience always kills me.
So, chapter 2, it's a little bit more about how the muscles are going to work within our bodies. And yeah, basically just how those muscles are going to work, what they're going to do to create movement. And so, starting off, just a quick anatomy, kinesiology, the study of movement, review. You've got muscles, they pull on bones to create rotation at joints. Muscles don't push. Any type of pushing motion you do is actually the culmination of multiple different pulling motions. Good example, a lot of people think bench press, it's a pushing motion. Really, it's a pulling motion of your tricep. It's a pulling motion of the anterior deltoid. It's a pulling motion of your pec. They're all just pulling your arm from this outstretched position to a forward position.
Yep. To mimic a pushing motion.
Yep. And then all movement is created by muscles pulling on those bones. Really important.
Yeah, that's why you often hear them together as the musculoskeletal system.
Definitely.
Muscles are useless without bones, and Yeah, bones are kind of useless without muscles. So kind of same thing with cardiopulmonary system. You really need one to have the other.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely do not work without each other. So kind of a physics review. You've got your levers. You want this one, or you want me to take this one?
I can take levers. This is something you really want to make sure you have down before you take, if you plan on taking this exam. I mean, if you want to do really anything with the fitness industry, this is good to just be aware of. But if you're going to take this exam, this is a key point to make sure you know. One, for the exam, and two, just going forward.
Definitely.
This is solid to know. So first class lever is classified as the fulcrum being located in between the resistive force and the applied force. And honestly, like with this, it's kind of nice. If you only need to know two of them. If you know the fulcrum and the applied force, or the applied force and the resistance force, like you can kind of figure out what class lever it is.
Okay.
So if you have two pieces of the puzzle, you can figure out third. I mean, kind of back to math, right? Your y equals mx plus b. You know most of it. You can figure out the last one.
Okay. Okay.
So your second class lever, fulcrum, is located distal end with resistive force in the middle, right? So I mean that's kind of like your wheelbarrow. Like your class one lever is your teeter totter, and then class two lever is kind of your wheelbarrow, right? So your fulcrum, or yeah, your resisted force is in between you and the fulcrum, so you don't have to apply as much pressure. And then your third class lever, I can't remember any of the examples for the third class lever, but that's where you're pushing in between the fulcrum and the resistance. So that's why it takes a lot of force, right? If you had a long stick, I mean, kind of like the wheelbarrow, you have a long stick and you put the weight at the end and you're trying to lift it up from the middle and it's bolted into the ground on the other side, that's going to take a lot of force to get that weight up. Whereas if you switch where you and the weight are, you got to put a lot less force to pick that weight up off the ground.
Definitely. Definitely. I think a good example of that third class lever that I think of as a child, you've all watched a small child try to pick up a broom from one end of that broom, and they can't do it because their mechanical advantage is so far off. That fulcrum is at their hands almost as they're trying to lift it up, and the head of that broom is so far out there that they just don't quite have that muscle strength to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and I like that you said mechanical advantage because that's really what it comes down to, right? First class lever, mechanical advantage is greater than one. Or sorry, first class levers are interesting. They can be greater than or less than one. They are interesting. So first class lever, it kind of depends, right? I mean, because even if it's on the other side, there's fulcrums in the middle. It should be the easiest to lift, but I mean, sometimes that weight is way too much or it's way too far out. There's a couple different factors, right? Its moment arm or its weight is greater than the combined force of your moment arm and weight. So sometimes it can be less than one, sometimes it can be more than one. Second class lever, however, always has a mechanical advantage that is greater than one because the lever arm that you have is longer than the lever arm of your resistance.
Okay.
And if I guess we've been throwing out lever arm quite a bit. Lever arm is just the distance from where you're rotating from. So if this was our pivot point, lever arm would be the distance that you're applying perpendicular force.
I got a picture that'll
perfect.
make this a little bit easier.
Yes, thank you. Yes, perfect. Right. So here it says lever, so that's actually perfect. Lever arm of our resistance here would be this distance. So I'm going to say, perfect. I'll let you write that in. I'll back up. Yep, perfect.
Sorry, I have terrible handwriting.
Yeah. So this distance would be your lever arm. It's perpendicular force here from the fulcrum. Right. So this lever arm is a lot shorter than this one over here. So in this case, if you were applying this force, which we are, force of A, so our force that we're applying, we would have a mechanical advantage greater than one due to the fact our lever arm is significantly larger.
Okay. Okay. I like it. I like it.
Perfect. I don't know if you want to take torque.
Definitely. I can. Yes. Torque. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways to quantify forces and what they do. And when a force is creating rotation, it's classified as torque, which is going to be the force times the distance away from the fulcrum that it is being applied. So if I have this we'll zoom in a little bit more on this picture so I can draw better. Say I am applying, let's say I'm applying 10 kilograms of force right here. And the distance right here is 1 meter. Then the torque is going to be well, I guess backing up a little bit, when we apply a force, it is the amount of mass times acceleration. Usually acceleration is going to be gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, times whatever weight it is. Times whatever mass it is.
Yes, there are differences.
Because mass and weight are not the same thing. And so that mass times gravity is going to be classified as a Newton. So 10 kilograms of force that I'm applying times that 9.8 would be 98 newtons, essentially, right here. And then that 1 meter would be 1 Newton meter, or 98 Newton meters. And that is going to be your classification of a torque, if that makes sense.
And then we are using metric system because that is where the 9.8 is relevant. Gravity is different in whatever our system.
Imperial system.
Yeah, imperial. So I was like, whatever our system is called.
And honestly, for the most part, those taking this exam, you're going to be dealing a lot with the metric system. It is the system that is recognized throughout the world, and it does make a lot more sense than the imperial system.
It's a lot easier. So much easier.
I bleed red, white, and blue. This is the one thing that I do not agree with America on.
This is way easier, bro. This is stupid easy.
It's so much better.
Yeah. Foreign if you don't know it, but once you get into it, you're like, oh, okay. All right, just go up by 10.
Yeah.
Just go up by 10. Yeah, it's so much better. It's so much better.
Yeah. And so we've got those moment arms in our body because every single joint is essentially a moment arm. If I have my bicep and I'm doing a curl, I've got a fulcrum right here. That's where it's moving. And then I've got a weight all the way out here. And then I am applying a force. And I'll give you 10 seconds, or you can pause if you want to take longer, to take a quick look and what type of lever is this system. Third class lever. So as you can see, you've got a really long moment arm of whatever resistance you have in your hand versus the lever arm of your muscle doing the work, and that fulcrum is out there on the very edge. And so as we actually move through a motion, that moment arm may be really tiny, really tiny and small right here. And then it's getting a little bit bigger, getting a little bit bigger. It's going to be the biggest at that midline. And then it's going to start getting smaller again, smaller again. And that is why, for a lot of muscles, you're going to be weaker at that beginning position because that moment arm is just so small. And as you get to that middle position, that's going to be where you're the strongest. And then you're going to start to get weaker at that top position again.
Yep. Yeah, perfect. That plays into something that will, it seems weird, that is also a little bit by design. We'll get into that a little bit later with the overlapping and whatnot.
Okay.
But it is, I don't know. It's interesting because the body, we talked about how mechanical advantages, right? 2 is always more than 1, 3 is always less than 1.
Yeah.
So why is it that a lot of the muscles, like a lot of the bigger joints, right, like your elbow, your shoulder, your knee, like why are those a lot of third class levers if they're so inefficient?
So They're inefficient because they create a lot of movement. You can move your arm a great deal and typically very quickly too. It doesn't take much for your arm to move through that range of motion. But then try doing that same thing with your foot. Lift your toes all the way up as high as you can get them, like they're trying to touch your shin. Put them all the way down. You didn't create very much. I mean, I've got fairly flexible ankles, and I can get maybe about 95 to 100 degrees of range of motion there. Whereas my arm, I've got almost probably closer to like 140-ish in that range of motion. And I can do that a lot faster than I can move my ankle back and forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so just kind of sacrificing strength for mobility.
Yeah, definitely. And we are very mobile humans, at least we used to be. There has been a slight shift in the last 50-ish years. But if you're taking this exam, you probably already know that, and you are passionate about fitness and want to help be a solution to that problem.
Yes, very likely. Ooh.
Here's a great one.
This
So there's actually variation from person to person. Nobody is going to be exactly the same. You've got me and Hayden, for instance. Hayden's substantially taller than me, at least 3 to 4 inches.
Yeah.
And so automatically his insertions are probably going to be slightly longer than mine, where that distance is. But then just from two people that may be the exact same height, one of them might be slightly different in how their muscles insert. Each person is going to be different. And so that's going to actually predispose some people to be better at generating power because they're going to have that longer moment arm. And so they're going to be able to move really quickly. And so they can generate all that speed really quickly. And if they can couple that with force of muscle contraction, they're going to be really, really strong. But that does come at different trade-offs because they're probably going to fatigue a lot faster as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we kind of live on this, the human body kind of lives on this scale, right, of mobility and strength. Everything's kind of in between, right? Like, I mean, take your hips, for example. Your hips and your shoulders, both ball and socket joints, both designed to have a lot of range of motion, a lot of mobility. But your shoulder gets an easy 180 and go all the way up, but I can't bench press as much as I can leg press.
Definitely.
Like, right? And so that's where, like, yeah, I don't have as much range of motion in my hips. And everybody, like, you don't have as much range of motion in your hips as you would your shoulder, but those legs are way stronger than your arms. If you are bench pressing the same that you are leg pressing, like, either A, you got something going on, or B, you're not training legs.
And that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Hayden, if I ever catch you bench pressing more than your leg pressing, it's going to be a cold day for you.
That's understandable. Right? But yeah, so like we all live on this spectrum, and even like in our own body, different joints are different things. And with this, like insertions do vary and it can affect the strength, right? If your insertion's a little more distal, you have a little more strength, maybe a little range of motion. I mean, like even like this is a random fact, but actually,
I was really hoping you were going to bring this up.
But actually, I mean, you kind of hear that like apes are pound for pound stronger than humans, and that's actually because on average, their insertions are just a little more distal than ours. So they don't have as much mobility as we do, but they have a little more strength due to that fact. So it is kind of interesting.
Okay.
Little random fact for you to throw out to whoever will listen because it's weird.
You mean I'm never going to be as strong as a gorilla?
Probably not.
Oh, man.
I mean,
Darn
they're
it.
huge and they don't lift weights. So that in and of itself, I got to throw around a bunch of heavy circles at least 4 times a week, and I will never look like that.
Darn
It's terrible.
it. Okay, strength and power. I mean, we've mentioned these a little bit. Strength is just going to be the amount of force that you can apply, and power is going to be how fast you can do it. I think, and kind of one of these questions that I have down here at the bottom, powerlifting versus Olympic weightlifting, which is a test of strength, which is a test of power. Don't let the names deceive you. Powerlifting is pure strength. Olympic weightlifting is power. At this point, those two sports are very much set in their ways. Those names are never going to change.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, like that snatch, you need to be able to lift that bar off the ground quick.
Yeah, definitely. Versus powerlifting, I mean, how slow have you seen that bar move sometimes when you're bench pressing?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like, yeah, like that Eddie Hall, that 1,000 pound, he didn't just rip that off the ground. He got it up, but
It was, yeah, but it was very slow. Yes, his power was terribly large.
yes, of course.
But by comparison, could he have generated that same power with less weight? Yes, and it would have moved faster. He traded off the weight component for the speed component.
Yes. Yeah. Easiest way between these two, if time's involved, it's a power movement.
Definitely.
There's no time, strength.
Yeah. And some sports are going to deal a lot more with the power, and some sports are going to deal a lot more with strength. I can't think of a strength sport off the top of my head outside of, powerlifting. But a lot of sports have a power component to them. Your linemen, as they have to explode up and into other linemen. Pitchers, as they have to explode through throwing that ball. Quarterbacks. Soccer players, as you have to just send that ball all the way down the pitch.
Right. I mean, even like your track sports. I mean, like any sort of jumping motion, something like that. You got to be able, like, yes, you need to have the strength, but you need to be able to apply that force into the ground quick to get yourself off the ground.
Definitely.
I can apply 1,000 pounds of force in the ground if it takes me 10 years.
Yeah.
Nothing, right? But if I apply that same power in 1 second, launching myself into outer space. But,
Yes. And if you really want to look at why does it matter, on page 30 of the textbook, there's your answer. It'll be right there for you guys. And we mentioned this briefly in the last chapter. Factors of strength, the two different things that contribute to strength are going to be recruitment and that rate coding. The rate coding being how often you are receiving action potentials at that muscle, whereas recruitment is how many motor units are being recruited to move that force. And generating more force is going to be a combination of both of those.
yeah, that's perfect, right? And then same thing with strength, right? Muscle size. I mean, I'm sure that one's pretty common to everybody. Typically, the bigger people lift heavier weights. So I was like, right, if we have more mass to our muscles, able to generate more force. But again, I mean, that's also, again, don't be deceived with that, right? Like your marathon runners aren't huge, but there's no shot on being any marathon runner in any sort of long distance racing. It's not happening.
I mean, some of them are, they've trained those mostly type 1 fibers to such a degree that they're able to generate great amounts of force. I mean, we have in our class a a man that is just, he is a runner and he does strictly long distance running. I would not want to race him in a 400-meter race. I'm pretty sure he would beat me.
He'd smoke me. He'd probably finish that 400 before I finish the 200. I'm not gonna lie.
Probably.
That dude is insane.
I am all about power. He would kick my trash.
Yeah, he moves at a crazy speed. I remember when we talked about VO2 max. He was like, I think he said like 70 or something. I was like, dude. For those of you who don't know, VO2 max, how much oxygen your body can process.
Yeah.
And 70 is insanely high. That's
Yeah.
top 1% of people.
I think the average male has a VO2 max in the mid 30s.
I think so. I think it's mid 30s, low 40s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
And then your insane cross country athletes are going to be that 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Your insane cyclers are going to be up there. I think the sport that has the highest is cross country skiing.
Yep. On average, it's cross country skiing.
Yeah. But here at the bottom, I have a question of what does it mean for two athletes of different sizes but same muscle cross-sectional area? So pound for pound, or I guess not pound for pound because they're going to be different sizes on other aspects. But if you had two individuals, one was 6'2" with 14-inch arms, and you had a 5'5" guy with those same sized arms. I think I said 14 inches.
I think so.
We'll go with 14 inches.
Cross the
That 5'5" guy is going to be stronger because based upon going back to those moment arms, his moment arm of how far away that weight is going to be to his cross-sectional area of that bicep is going to be a bigger rate or a smaller ratio technically. And so he's going to be able to lift more weight as opposed to that taller guy. And so pound for pound wise, you're actually going to find that a lot of smaller athletes are technically stronger, but then you get to these giants, the Brian Shaws, the Eddie Halls, the Hafthor Bjornsons that are just absolutely massive. I'm pretty sure their arm is bigger than my leg. Their leg is bigger than my trunk.
Yeah.
And they are just so massive, and they are genetically predisposed to those type 2 fibers that they are just so strong.
Yeah, it is crazy that a lot of those, like a lot of the high-end athletes, like your Olympic level, your top people, like your elite level lifters, a lot of them do have a genetic advantage over you. That is just a fact, right? Like genetics aren't everything. You can train, you can get better and improve and compete, but everybody's got a ceiling.
Yeah. And a lot of that ceiling is genetic and inherited and made from generations and generations of people doing those types of things. The body will slowly adapt and those genes will get passed on. You've got, I can't remember what country it is in Africa, but they will literally tire out gazelles because they'll just chase them as hunters. They're just chasing a gazelle, one of the fastest animals there is, and they're going to tire it out. That's crazy. And then they come and they compete at the Olympics in the marathon, and they win.
They smoke us.
The best of the best.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, like you'll see certain areas that are right, like a big thing in the Olympics. I mean, Jamaicans are sprinters.
Yeah,
crazy quick.
Random, very random, but the enhanced games have just been announced. Have you heard about those ones?
I have not.
They have, I think it's supposed to be in the year 2028. and it is essentially meant to be a Olympics with no drug testing, just seeing how far the human body can actually be pushed. And they tested it already with a swimmer who, back in 2012 was a fairly decent swimmer, one of those ones that was in the Olympics in the finals.
Yeah.
And then another one of his, he hasn't been swimming competitively in that aspect in quite a while. I think maybe a year or two ago, they put him on the gear, and another swimmer. And unofficially, obviously, because untested, they did. I saw it last week, and they broke the world record. That said, there are pros and cons to performance enhancing drugs. Yes. We will be discussing those later on. There are things that they're going to help you with, but there are definitely cons and some health factors that you definitely need to be aware of if that is a route that you want to go. You do so at your own risk.
Yeah.
And we will discuss them later.
Yep, they do come up.
Okay. Muscle fiber orientation. I can take this one.
Yeah, go for it.
So the way that muscles are oriented in our body also plays a large role in how much force you're able to generate. If there is what's called an angle of pination, where the muscles are diagonal and not just parallel in line with the joint, you're going to get more force because you're able to put more of those motor units, more of those muscle fibers, the filaments into a different area. And so you can see here in this image, there are just some different examples of those. You've got the deltoid labeled M, which is going to be a multi-pinnate. It's going to have lots of different pinnations just stacked next together to create a lot of force. And if you look at it, the force that it's generating is actually very far away from that resistance that it's going to try to move. So it's got lots of pinnations in there to increase the amount of force. Then you have your bipinnate muscles. A great example of that is your biceps, and a muscle that we use all day. And so it would be advantageous to have it be a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Effective.
I think the bipinnate's that rectus femoris.
Oh,
Fusiform.
You're right. The rectus femoris is going to be a bipinnate muscle. Another muscle that you use all day long in walking.
It's one of our anti-gravity muscles.
Yeah. So it's going to be very effective at conserving energy via using all those muscle units that it has compacted in there. Another one is going to be your gastrocnemius, those calf muscles that look so pretty back there. They're going to be that bipinnate. You've got your tibialis anterior, which is a very small muscle that helps pull the top of your foot towards your shin. And if you look at your own calf and you try to find it, you'll find it, but it's very small and it has to cram just a bunch of muscles into a very small space.
Yes.
And so it uses this very strange unipinnate. And then, the bicep brachii is a fusiform where we're just trying to create a large amount of movement. And then, kind of like the fusiform, you've got your longitudinal muscles. And they're kind of just a bunch of fusiforms connected together end over end. And those are going to be your pretty six-pack abs.
Amazing.
Love-
Pain to get, but
I'd
amazing.
love to see those someday. And then the last one is these radiate muscles. And those are going to be some of those glute muscles, and they're just going to be spreading out into a larger amount of area, but then come together into a very small area at that tendinous joint.
Okay.
And looking at our anatomy, I can see why they have to come together. We've got a lot of things going on at that greater trochanter where they're attaching.
Yes. Quite a few muscles that attach right there. It is a busy space,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yes. Hopefully our professors never ask me to tell them exactly where each one of them is attaching, because I memorized that for test and measures for one test, and it is gone.
I totally forgot that clock too. I'm not gonna lie. It'd probably be good to go back and memorize, but
Probably.
by random chance, if any of our professors are watching this, I have gone back. By the time you see this, I have gone back and reviewed it. Do not email me to test that.
Please.
Just take my word for it.
And if by have a chance the professor is watching this, tell some of those students that want to go into the sports field, or you feel like this would be advantageous. Send them to these videos.
Yeah, more than happy to use them.
Okay, I think you mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about this muscle length and contraction.
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a fun concept. So like I mentioned earlier, as Quinn talked about earlier, right, with the biceps in that picture where it was like, okay, we have a bigger moment arm here at 90, and the human body is actually pretty amazing. There is a reason for that, and it's because at that 90 degrees, that weight is furthest away from us, which means it's got its longest moment arm, and we have our longest moment arm to compensate as well. But along with that, we actually get a better lineup of these actin and myosin filaments. Because if we, right, like you want everything to be able to match up. Like if you take a Velcro strap and you line it up perfectly, it's a lot harder to pull that apart than it is if you have just the ends of it lined up. And that's kind of that same concept here.
Okay.
And so a lot of the muscles you'll see where the weight would be hardest is actually where you have most of the actin and myosin lined up covering each other. So we get into that efficiency of it. Whereas here we have active insufficiency and passive insufficiency. And so passive insufficiency is our muscle is stretched out too far. So that would be more down here, right? So I mean, this would be your biceps out, right? Like when you're going for anything, right? When a bench press or a squat, it is rough at the bottom.
Definitely.
Like you, like that is like, right, you have your sticking point. And that's because your muscles are stretched so far out, you're not having a lot of overlap here. You can't generate as much force here as you could here. And then we have our active insufficiency, which is more where we're fully contracted, right? So same thing on the squat. Now we're standing all the way up instead of deep in that squat. And you can actually see we're still missing out on some contraction here. We have some overlap of this actin. So there's less space that these myosins can't bind to. And so again, we're missing some like prime real estate, if you will, of binding area.
Yeah. And in therapeutic exercise, we had a great opportunity with some handheld dynamometers to look at, or maybe it was pathokinesiology.
Yeah, it was one of the
one of them, where we had the opportunity to look at resting length versus active insufficiency versus passive insufficiency. And if you have access to a handheld dynamometer, you can easily do this. You just take it and squeeze it with your arm just straight out at the side, kind of like this, and then try doing that with your wrist pulled back. And you're going to be creating a passive insufficiency because these flexor muscles in that forearm are going to be really lengthened. And then try again with your wrist completely curled in, and that's going to be that active insufficiency that we're discussing.
Yep. Yeah, perfect example of those.
Just look at the difference in those three numbers.
Yep. And this is actually, we talked about power earlier, and again, the body's amazing, but also it does kind of come with its checks and balances, so to speak. You can, again, like, right, the body works on a scale, as I said, with mobility and strength. Kind of same thing with force you can produce and the speed at which you can produce it.
Okay.
And so here, like, you kind of see eccentric, which is where we're strongest. The muscles can produce the most force at a lengthening pace versus holding them up, right? Like if somebody hands you a really heavy dumbbell, chances are you can slowly lower it, but if they hand you that same weight and tell you to bring it up, you probably won't do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why you can see more force produced here. And you're producing, more torque, more Newton meters, concentric. You're sacrificing a lot of that. Essentially, you're sacrificing speed and strength. You need one or the other. Like I said, there's that spectrum. And so that's kind of what this graph is showing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a good example of this is you're going to have that Olympic lifter snatching whatever they're snatching.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight. And they're doing that really fast. I bet if you were to have them deadlift, they could deadlift quite a bit more, but it's going to be moving at that slower rate.
Yes, for sure.
Because as you get to that slower rate, you're going to be increasing the amount of force that you are able to produce.
Yeah, for sure. Because like, explaining it better than I did before now, right? You have the velocity, degrees per second. So if you notice, both in concentric and eccentric, the further away we are, or the faster we're moving, we're producing less force for both of them. The closer we get to that zero, the more force we can produce. It's kind of just, if you can grasp that concept, is what this graph is saying.
Okay. I like it. Okay. And then we slightly may have slightly touched on it earlier when we were talking about cross-sectional area. You've got a strength to mass ratio. And when I was reading about this, I actually, if you look at the side of my textbooks, they are just covered in notes and pictures and things to better help me understand things. I actually drew a little 2x2 square and then a 2x2 cube and then a 4x4 square and a 4x4 cube, and was looking at how just doubling the dimensions takes a surface area and it only increases a surface area by 4, but the volume increases by 8. And so if you look at that, that volume is going to create more weight.
Okay.
But the surface area, that cross-sectional area, is not increasing at that same amount. And so there is actually a optimal size for different athletes. If you get too big, you may not be able to develop the strength aspect to stay competitive at that level. And so you will actually see a lot of high-level powerlifters that have a weight class that they stay in, and they could probably get bigger. They could add more muscle mass, but they know at that weight, that's where they're the most competitive.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so I think I hit all those. Oh, I did. It looks like for some odd reason the classic formula did not come into the slides. Let me try to find that real quickly in the textbook. Because it is definitely an important thing. But they do actually have questions at the end of each chapter, and this is one of those questions, just kind of to give you a feeling of what the questions will be like on the CSCS exam. And so it is definitely something that you would want to look at and have memorized. Obviously, I don't have it memorized quite yet.
That's a good thing we haven't taken the exam yet.
Yeah.
Still got time.
Okay. So in the classic formula, the load lifted is divided by body weight to the 2/3 power.
Okay.
So you're gonna have weight.
Just realized it's on
Oh, you've got it on yours. I don't know why it's
that. Yeah, I was
didn't
gonna say.
transfer over to my thing. But I'll just write it in here. Weight sub L for lifted divided by weight of athlete to the 2/3. It's supposed to be a 3 to the 2/3 power. So that's what that formula is going to be. And so moving on, just from how the muscles work, there's different types of resistance that we have to work against in different sports, from just powerlifting or Olympic lifting, where you're just lifting heavy circles all day long attached to each other, or strongmen, where you're pulling a bus or lifting rocks.
Yeah, they're
throwing
crazy.
sandbags. Like, there are different types of weights, and there are advantages and disadvantages to them. You've got your free weights, which are going to work on a lot of, they're not attached to anything, so you're going to use major muscle groups, but you're also going to use smaller groups for stabilization. The disadvantage is it may be harder to master that technique just because that weight is able to freely move.
Yes.
Then you've got the weight stacks machine. You can see examples of both of them. I've got a bench press and a chest press for pictures. The chest press is using those same major muscle groups, but you're not going to be using your rotator cuffs nearly as much to stabilize that barbell so that it doesn't twist over and land on your stomach, because it can't twist when it's attached to an actual support mechanism.
Fixed path.
Yeah. But you're probably going to be able to lift a little bit more weight with that because you don't have to worry and spend energy on those smaller muscles for stabilization.
Makes sense. Yeah. And then different kinds of resistance training, right? I mean, with the sled push, you're adding weight. I mean, yeah, you're pushing weight, but really there you're fighting that friction that's being caused of the weight of the sled. So, I mean, right, give more weight, it adds harder, or add more weight, gets harder. Long day. But yeah, so resistance force is two objects move when pressed together. And so that depends on the normal force, or what the ground is pushing back in, and the coefficient of friction. And then, so yeah, like I said, sled push, brake pad resistance, ergometers, friction coefficient to get object moving is greater. Yeah, so static friction. So once you have something moving, it's easier to get it going. The static friction's higher than the other. I can't remember the name.
I want to say dynamic.
I think it might be dynamic. Yeah, but general thing is, if it's sitting still already, it's going to be harder to get it moving. I mean, kind of that inertia, objects in motion like to stay in motion, kind of a deal. And then fluid resistance, right? So I mean, that's where you'll see like water, running in water, or I mean, even you can have with air. I mean, people throw on those parachutes and do sprinting drills there.
Yeah, definitely.
That's just more resistance there. It's just air resistance.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go, parachute sprints.
Yeah. And then there actually are some machines that, older machines, albeit I don't think they're around that much anymore, just because the components involved in them, that use air compression for resistance. And I've got a picture of one right there. And so you've got a small piston right there in gold. And as it is as you lift the weight, it's compressing that air, which does not like to be compressed, creating that resistance. I've actually used some of these at a gym that I used to have a membership to, and they're slightly different. They feel different. That's for sure. I don't know how to describe it beyond different.
Yeah, the clinical that I'm in right now has a Kaiser.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay.
It's great. It's crazy to bump up. Some patients get fixated on. I'm like, we'll do 20 pounds, and they're like, that says 20.2. I'm like, okay, all right, all right.
We're
dude.
splitting hairs here.
Yeah, I'm like,
Hair. You know it.
I love that. Such a good time.
Okay, another type of resistance that we have is elastic resistance. You're actually going to see this a lot in home gym type stuff. I'm going to show my age a little bit here. When I was a child in the 90s, and there was, you don't remember those.
I wasn't ready for that comment.
Some people weren't born in the 90s.
I am some people.
Bowflexes, as I have a picture of here, were they were in every commercial because that was a thing too. Commercials.
Yeah, the same kind of deal. We just call them ads nowadays.
Oh, okay, yeah. We had commercials. We couldn't pay to get rid of them either. They were there.
Yeah, dude, we're in school. I'm not paying to get rid of those either. I suffer.
100%. But they're based upon just elasticity and bending of things or stretching of things.
Okay.
And they're really interesting because the further you bend it, the further you stretch it, the more resistance it's going to give. I mean, take a rubber band, for instance. You start that pull, it's really easy. You start to get to the end, it's going to get to be more. But then you could get a bigger rubber band. And so it's really dependent on a lot of things. And I think later on in a different chapter, it is going to give you formulas for just different bands and the thicknesses of them and the stretch of them and how much force they're going to give. But the important aspect is they're going to get more resistive as you get further out. And so maybe using a band for a jump may not be the most advantageous to try to add resistance to jumping to try to increase jump height. Because at the bottom, where you're having to develop the most amount of force as quickly as possible, it's not doing a ton of resistance. But then at the top, it's going to be doing a lot of resistance.
When you're in the air and not producing any force. Makes sense.
Okay.
So this is just good mechanics that you want to be, I mean, especially as a strength and conditioning coach, because this is for CSCS. Good biomechanics is, and everything that you want, right? I mean, there's good lifting techniques, there's bad, and that's definitely something that we'll get into in later chapters. But keeping a neutral spine, avoiding exercises, avoiding excessive lordosis, which is just excessive curvature in that lumbar spine, or kyphosis, excessive curvature in like your thoracic cervical spine, and then to avoid potential disc herniations. I mean, it is interesting. The body will adapt to the stress that you put on it, but I mean, this is why, like with deadlifting, you get a lot of those people. You're like, nope, keep that back straight. If you're not used to it, we're not going to put the stress on that disc and cause a herniation. And then Valsalva maneuver, increase chest pressure. Not recommended for most individuals. Valsalva maneuver can be difficult. The idea is you are giving your body something to push against, but this does cause increases in blood pressure and other things such as that. So it is mindful. Make sure your clients that you're working with or patients that you're working with don't have like blood pressure issues or bowel and bladder problems, like anything that doesn't want increased pressure, especially in the abdominal region.
Yeah.
Those are things to be cautious of. But then lifting belts can help maintain intra-abdominal pressure. Same thing as that Valsalva maneuver, just kind of another layer. But yeah. And then only needed for activities that affect the low back. Please do not put on a weightlifting belt if you're doing bicep curls.
And important with that lifting belt, a lot of people, myself somewhat included, create a reliance on those, and so they rely on them for that safety aspect of creating that internal pressure, which is obviously something that you want when you're deadlifting or squatting. You don't want your back collapsing on you. You want to have a strong core, and it's just helping to create that stronger core, but you don't want to develop a complete reliance on it. So you do want to probably only use it for those max effort lifts, is what the text says. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today because I had a patient yesterday who came in for because he had injured his meniscus back in '08, and since then he's always had a brace on it. The year currently is 2025, so '08 to 2025, that's 17 years of a knee brace. And it's not just one knee brace. He's worn multiple knee braces, one on top of each other. And he has just relied on that for all sorts of support. And so, whether the meniscus was going to heal or not, it was never stressed to the point that it needed to heal. And so, it did just slowly atrophy away. And so, he did recently have an MRI, and it said that his meniscus was basically gone because it was never receiving any stress, so it never had to adapt. And so lifting belts, a lot of those different types of things that can help to create stability, are a great thing to use. Don't don't solely rely on them. Use them for the times that they're needed, and when they're not needed, don't use them. When you're warming up for squats, if you're new to lifting, maybe when you're warming up, it might be good. Or you could learn the proper form, and just never need to rely on a belt at all. Or if you're a in-depth lifter that uses lots of heavy weights, you probably don't need it when you're going to be under a couple 100 pounds, because your core is probably strong enough to do without it.
Yeah, you're fine.
And then I guess just some good important things to remember is proper warm-ups are always good. The joints are developed in a way that they use a lot of different mechanisms to make it so that there's less friction inside the joints. But part of that is that it does need to warm up. That synovial fluid in those joints doesn't like to be cold. And when it is cold, it doesn't move very well to lubricate your joints. And then certain joints do technically really only move in one plane of motion. Don't try to make them move in other planes of motion.
Yeah. Your knee does this. That is it.
We won't get into the other little part that it does, but it does this.
Okay, yeah, the screw hole mechanism exists, but
you're not going to be training the popliteus muscle.
You better not be. I'd cry.
For that aspect, it moves in the sagittal plane. It goes forward and backwards.
Yep.
And so those are just some important things to know. And there are some references. We hope that this was informative. We hope it was fun.
I hope so. You wasted a lot of time watching this. It was not
fun. And these slides are available. We'll try to throw an email up for you guys if you're wanting them. Obviously, please don't sell them on your own. I have put some effort into making these slides.
This is a interprofessional respect here,
Yes.
helping others out. So hopefully you don't
And
come in
obviously, if I
undercut.
find that they are getting sold, maybe I will start either not giving them out or having to sell them myself.
Yes.
But thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have had a great time